My name is Riley Carter, and for as long as I can remember, the smell of warm circuit boards, burnt capacitors, and slightly oily metal has felt more like home than any perfume or freshly baked cookies ever could. Our family's shop sat squeezed between a noodle stall and a photocopy place on a narrow street in the older part of the city. The sign above the rolling shutter read, Carter Tech, Repairs and Upgrades since 2004, in slightly faded red letters. Dad, Thomas Carter, painted it himself the year I turned 7. Even now, more than a decade later, he still points at those words whenever a customer asks how long we've been around, as if the peeling paint is proof of honor rather than neglect. The truth was, by the time I was 16, the shop was barely breathing. New smartphone models arrived every 6 months. People stopped fixing 5-year-old laptops, and the profit margin on replacing a cracked screen or reapplying thermal paste grew thinner than the thermal paste itself. Yet Dad refused to see it as failure. To him, every customer who walked through the beaded curtain carrying a wheezing tower or a laptop that wouldn't boot was proof that we were still useful, still needed. He'd spend 40 minutes chatting with Mr. Pham about football while patiently diagnosing why the old Dell wouldn't post, then charge just enough to cover the new power supply and a bottle of soda for the man's grandson. "We're not here to get rich, Riley," he would say while wiping his hands on the same blue rag he'd used since I was in elementary school. "We're here to keep things running." My older sister Sabrina saw things very differently. Sabrina was the golden child. Everyone said so, and she believed it completely. National scholarship, top-tier international high school, debate team captain, perfect IELTS score. Acceptance letters from 3 universities abroad before she even finished grade 11. She carried herself like someone who had already left this street, this city, this small, sticky-floored shop behind. When she came home during holidays, she barely looked at the rows of dusty monitors or the tangle of cables spilling out of the back room. To her, our life here was something to be pitied, a temporary embarrassment she had to endure until her real life could begin. She never said it outright, at least not in front of Dad, but the message was clear in the way she rolled her eyes when a customer thanked me for saving their wedding photos, or how she sighed dramatically whenever the shop phone rang during dinner. "You're wasting your brain in this place," she told me once, voice low so Dad wouldn't hear. "You could be doing something important. Instead you're—" "What? Reinstalling Windows for grandmas?" I didn't answer. There was no point. Sabrina measured worth in prestige points. I measured it in whether the machine in front of me came back to life because of something I understood. While she was busy collecting certificates, I was quietly teaching myself. Late at night, after Dad locked the rolling shutter and went upstairs to watch old action movies, I stayed behind in the dim glow of the last working fluorescent tube. I read documentation, watched grainy YouTube tutorials, cloned repositories on GitHub, broke things on purpose just to figure out how to fix them. I learned Python, then JavaScript, then dipped into Seeds, because one of Dad's regular customers, a small importer of office stationery, kept complaining about how his Excel sheets couldn't keep up with the new warehouse. That complaint became my first real project. I spent almost 4 months building it, a simple inventory management desktop app tailored exactly for businesses like his. Nothing fancy. Barcode scanning with a cheap USB scanner, real-time stock alerts, purchase order generation, basic profit per item reporting. I gave it a clean interface, stole a few design ideas from modern SaaS dashboards I could never afford to subscribe to, wrote solid error handling, and even added a dark mode because I knew Mr. Min hated glare at 9 p.m. When I finally installed it on his 3 office computers and showed him how to use it, he stared at the screen for a long minute without speaking. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "How much do you want for this?" I hadn't planned to sell it. I just wanted to solve his problem. But he insisted. And Dad, standing quietly in the doorway wiping motor oil off his forearms, gave me the smallest nod I'd ever seen. So I named a price. Modest, almost apologetic. Mr. Min paid in cash, right there on the scratched glass counter, and told me 2 other friends in the same trade wanted the same thing. That was the beginning. Not fireworks, not viral success. Just a few crumpled bills in an old biscuit tin under my desk, and the sudden, quiet realization that maybe I didn't need to shout about my worth the way Sabrina did. Maybe building something useful, really useful, and watching it quietly make someone's day less stressful was its own kind of proof. Sabrina still saw me as the sister stuck behind a counter surrounded by obsolete hardware, but I was already somewhere else. I was writing code that made small businesses breathe a little easier. And for the first time, I wasn't just repairing someone else's broken things. I was creating something that hadn't existed before. That felt bigger than any acceptance letter ever could. I still remember the exact night the biscuit tin under my desk became too small for the cash. It was a humid Tuesday in late 2022. Rain hammered the tin roof of the shop so hard that customers stopped coming after 6 p.m. I sat alone under the single surviving fluorescent light, counting notes from 3 new clients who had bought the inventory software that week. The total came to just over 28 million jong, more money than the shop had made in repairs during the entire previous month. That was when I understood something irreversible had begun. I didn't stop at one product. I couldn't. Every time a customer asked, "Can it do this too?" Or, "Do you have something for payroll, invoicing, customer tracking?" I went back to the keyboard. Nights blurred into mornings. I drank instant coffee that tasted like regret and wrote code until my eyes burned. The little desktop app grew limbs. Cloud sync, multi-user access, mobile reporting, integration with popular payment gateways that small businesses in Vietnam actually used. I gave it a proper name, Stockflow, and started charging monthly subscriptions instead of one-time fees. The numbers began to climb in a way that felt almost unfair. I learned to talk to people. Real talk, not just, "Yes, sir, your screen is cracked, it'll be 800K. I learned how to listen when a tired shop owner told me his biggest fear wasn't competition, but forgetting to reorder stock and losing customers forever. I learned which features they would actually pay for and which ones were just nice-to-have vanity. I built relationships one WhatsApp message at a time. A textile importer in Binh Duong became my first champion customer. He recommended me to his entire business association. Word spread quietly, the way good things sometimes do in this city. Not with advertisements, but with uncles telling uncles over morning phaco. By mid-2024, Stockflow had almost 400 paying subscribers. I had quit pretending I was just helping Dad with the shop. The repair counter still existed, but it had become mostly Dad's domain. I rented a small co-working space on the 4th floor of an old building in District 7. One desk, bad air conditioning, and a view of construction cranes that never stopped moving. I hired my first 2 employees, a junior developer fresh out of FPT University who was faster than me at React, and a part-time customer success person who spoke English better than I did. We called ourselves Carter Dynamics, not because it sounded grand. It just felt honest. The money wasn't enormous by Silicon Valley standards, but in our world, it was life-changing. I paid off the last of Dad's old business loan. I bought him a new ergonomic chair for the shop because his back had suffered for 20 years. I even surprised him with a trip to Da Nang, the first real vacation he'd taken since Mom left. He cried when I handed him the tickets. I told myself that was enough. Then Sabrina came home. She arrived unannounced on a Saturday afternoon in early 2025, wheeling a hard-shell suitcase that probably cost more than 3 months of my early subscription revenue. She had graduated with honours, done a 6-month internship at a Big 4 consulting firm in Singapore, and collected another shiny line on her LinkedIn that I was sure she'd rehearsed saying out loud in the mirror. She walked into the co-working space like she was doing an inspection, looked at the mismatched chairs, the whiteboards covered in my messy handwriting, the two employees who glanced up nervously. Then she looked at me, really looked, and smiled the way people smile when they're about to claim something they believe has always belonged to them. "Riley," she said, voice soft and practiced, "this is cute. You've done well for yourself. But now that it's becoming real, don't you think it's time the family steps in properly?" I didn't understand at first. Then she started talking about professional structure, governance, strategic vision, words that sounded beautiful until you realized they were weapons. Dad was the one who delivered the final blow. He called me to the old shop that same evening. The rolling shutter was half down, the neon Carter Tech sign flickering like it was tired. He sat on his usual stool, hands folded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Sabrina has a point, Con," he said quietly. "She studied business. She knows people in high places. She can help take this thing you built to the next level. I want both my daughters to be part of it. Equal." Equal. The word landed like a slap. I tried to explain. I told him about the nights I slept on the floor of the co-working space because I couldn't afford to go home, about negotiating with hosting providers when we almost went offline, about rewriting the entire back end myself when the first cloud provider increased prices, about every single feature that existed because a real customer had asked for it and I had delivered. He listened, he nodded, and then he said the sentence that still echoes in my head whenever the office gets too quiet. "She's your sister, Riley. Family comes first. I'm making her co-CEO. Starting next month." I stood there in the smell of old solder and stale instant noodles, feeling something crack inside my chest. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet, permanent fracture. Sabrina had never written a single line of code. She had never stayed up until 4 a.m. answering a panicked customer whose entire day's sales data had disappeared. She had never felt the terror of seeing the first month's churn rate tick upward and knowing it could end everything. But she had the degree. She had the confidence. She had Dad's trust. The kind of trust I had spent years quietly earning and apparently could never fully win. They announced it at our first proper company meeting 2 weeks later. Sabrina wore a blazer that cost more than my monthly salary back when I still worked part-time at the shop. She talked about vision, branding, Series A, funding, international expansion. Everyone clapped. Even my junior developer clapped, though he kept glancing at me with something like worry in his eyes. I smiled. I nodded. I said thank you when someone congratulated me on having such a talented sister, but inside a different story had already started writing itself. The story of how the thing I built with my own 2 hands, late nights, and stubborn quiet love was slowly, politely being taken away. Not with a fight, not with screaming, with family, with smiles, with the word equal that somehow never felt equal at all. And I knew, even as I sat there pretending to be happy, that this was only the beginning of the real struggle. By the spring of 2026, Carter Dynamics wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving in a way I still sometimes had to pinch myself to believe. We had crossed the $50 million annual recurring revenue mark 3 months earlier. The number appeared on the dashboard one ordinary Thursday morning while I was sipping lukewarm café soja at my desk. I stared at it for a full minute before I allowed myself to exhale. 50 million USD. Not some vanity metric inflated by one-time license sales. Real, predictable monthly subscription revenue from more than 12,000 small and medium businesses across Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. We had offices now. The original co-working space in District 7 had grown into a full floor, then 2 floors. Then we moved to a shiny new building in Thu Duc with floor-to-ceiling windows and beanbags nobody ever sat on. We had 64 employees. We had a proper HR person who made us do icebreakers. We even had branded hoodies. And none of it felt entirely real to me. Because while the numbers climbed and the press releases multiplied, the person everyone saw when they looked at Carter Dynamics was no longer me. It was Sabrina. She became the face of the company almost overnight, or at least that's how it felt. The first sign was subtle. A local business magazine wanted to do a cover story on the young female founder revolutionizing SME tech in Southeast Asia. Sabrina volunteered. She said it made sense. She had the polished English, the networking skills, the executive presence. I didn't argue. I told myself it didn't matter who held the microphone as long as the product kept improving. But then the interviews kept coming. Forbes Asia did a profile titled Sabrina Carter, the visionary behind Vietnam's fastest-growing SaaS unicorn hopeful. Tech in Asia ran a long Q&A where she talked about our journey from a humble family repair shop to regional leader, conveniently skipping the part where she hadn't set foot in the shop for more than a decade before the money started flowing. She was invited to speak at TechFest, at Startup Grind events in Singapore, at a Women in Tech panel in Bangkok. Each time she stepped on stage in tailored blazers and statement earrings, the audience clapped for the story she told, a story that positioned her as the architect, the strategist, the one who saw the opportunity and scaled it. I watched the clips on my phone late at night, volume low so nobody in the open plan office would hear. I watched her smile that practiced, camera-ready smile and say things like, I bootstrapped this company with sheer determination, or I knew from day one that inventory was the silent killer for small businesses. Every word was polished, confident, believable. And every word erased me a little more. The real work, the endless debugging sessions at 3 a.m., the architecture rewrites when AWS costs spiked, the customer Zoom calls where I personally walked a 62-year-old hardware store owner through two-factor authentication, that stayed invisible. The late-night Slack messages with the engineering team when we pushed a critical fix before Tet holiday rush. The product roadmap I still maintained alone in a Google Sheet because nobody else had time to look at it. The quiet decisions that kept churn below 4% when every competitor's was double digits. None of that made it into the narrative. Worse, Sabrina started rewriting the org chart in slow motion. First, it was the board meetings. She suggested, and Dad quietly agreed, that strategic discussions should be limited to C-level only. I was still listed as co-CEO on paper, but somehow the calendar invites stopped coming. I'd find out about major decisions after the fact, a new pricing tier, a partnership with a regional bank, a hiring freeze I hadn't been consulted on. When I asked why I wasn't in the room, Sabrina would tilt her head and say, Riley, you're so valuable in product. We didn't want to pull you away from what you do best. What I did best. As if building the thing that generated the 50 million wasn't strategic. Then came the rebranding exercise. A fancy agency from Singapore flew in and spent 3 days interviewing leadership. They never interviewed me. Sabrina told them I was heads down on engineering. The new logo, the new tagline, powering growth seamlessly, the glossy pitch deck, all presented to me as a fait accompli. When I pointed out that the messaging no longer mentioned our origin as a Vietnamese bootstrapped story, the part that actually differentiated us, she smiled thinly and said, We're going global now, Riley. Nostalgia doesn't sell to VCs. VCs? That was the next phase. She started courting investors in earnest. Pitch decks with her photo on the cover slide, term sheets that listed her as the primary founder. When I tried to join the conversations, she'd gently steer me out. You focus on making sure the platform doesn't break during due diligence. I'll handle the storytelling. Storytelling. The word made my stomach turn. Dad watched it all happen and said almost nothing. When I finally cornered him one Sunday at the old family house, the one we still kept even though nobody lived there full-time anymore. He only sighed and rubbed his temples. She's doing what's best for the company, Con. You built the engine. She's driving the car. Both are important. I wanted to scream that I hadn't just built the engine. I'd built the car, the road, the map, and taught myself how to drive while everyone else was still figuring out how to open the door. But I didn't. I just nodded, because arguing with Dad about Sabrina had always felt like punching fog. By late 2026, I was a ghost in my own company. I still had access to the codebase. I still approved every major release. But the decisions that shaped the future, fundraising rounds, executive hires, international expansion plans, happened in rooms I was no longer invited to. Employees who used to come to me with questions now hesitated, glancing towards Sabrina's glass-walled office first. My Slack threads grew quieter. My calendar emptied. And every time another article dropped with her face smiling out from the screen, another award landed on her shelf: Entrepreneur of the Year Southeast Asia, Women in Tech Leader Rising Star in SaaS. I felt the fracture in my chest widen. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was exhausted. Exhausted from pretending it didn't hurt. Exhausted from watching someone else wear my life's work like a designer coat. Exhausted from loving a family that kept choosing the reflection over the real thing. But exhaustion has a way of hardening into something else when you leave it alone long enough. And I was very close to that edge. The invitation came in a cream envelope with gold foil lettering, the kind Sabrina loved because it screamed tasteful extravagance. Dad's 60th birthday. A private dinner at the rooftop restaurant of the new 5-star hotel in District 1. The one with the infinity pool that overlooks the Saigon River and makes you feel for a few hours like you've escaped the city's humidity and chaos. 120 guests. Business partners, old friends from the neighborhood, a handful of Sabrina's polished contacts from Singapore and Bangkok, even a couple of journalists who'd covered her rise. And me. I almost didn't go. I stood in front of the mirror in my small rented apartment for 20 minutes, staring at the navy dress I'd bought specifically because it was understated enough not to compete with anyone. I kept thinking about the way Sabrina had smiled when she handed me the invitation 2 weeks earlier. That small, pitying curve of the lips she reserved for moments when she was about to win something she believed I never deserved. But it was Dad's birthday. The man who'd taught me how to solder my first circuit board, who'd never once complained when I turned the back room into a server farm at 16. I couldn't not show up. So I went. The rooftop was lit like a movie set, strings of warm fairy lights, long tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white orchids and eucalyptus. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Waiters in black vests moved like shadows carrying trays of champagne flutes and bite-sized banseo. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked expensive. Dad sat at the head table wearing the charcoal suit I'd bought him last Tet, the one he swore he'd only wear for important occasions. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders slightly hunched, but his smile was wide when he saw me. He stood, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "You came, Con. Thank you." For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. We talked about the old shop, about how the rent had doubled again, about the neighbour who still brought him free café sewer every morning. I let myself pretend this was just a family party. Then Sabrina took the microphone. She had changed into a crimson gown that caught every light in the room. Her hair was swept up in a low chignon, diamonds glinting at her ears. She looked like she belonged on a red carpet, not a rooftop in Saigon. The jazz faded out, conversations hushed. "Good evening, everyone," she began, voice smooth and amplified. "Thank you for being here to celebrate the man who gave us everything. My father, Thomas Carter." Applause. Warm, genuine. Dad waved modestly, cheeks pink. Sabrina waited for the clapping to die down, then continued. "Tonight isn't just about looking back. It's about looking forward. Carter Dynamics, the company we all know and love, has grown beyond what any of us could have imagined. $50 million in revenue, thousands of businesses depending on us every day, a future that stretches across borders. More applause. A few whoops from the back. She turned slightly, eyes finding me where I stood near the railing, half hidden behind a potted palm. And none of it would have been possible without family, without loyalty, without vision. I felt my stomach tighten. But vision requires leadership, clear, singular leadership. And after many long, difficult conversations, with our board, with our investors, with our father, we've made a decision that's best for the company's future. She paused. Let the silence stretch. Effective immediately, I will assume the role of sole CEO of Carter Dynamics. The words landed like a dropped glass. I heard someone gasp, saw heads turn toward me, felt the heat rush into my face. Sabrina wasn't finished. Riley has been an important part of the early days. She wrote some of the first code, fixed some computers, kept things running when it was small. We're all grateful for that chapter. Grateful. Chapter. Past tense. But the truth is, running a company at this scale requires more than technical skill. It requires strategy, presence, the ability to inspire investors, to command rooms, to represent the brand on the global stage. Riley has never been comfortable in that spotlight. And honestly, she's never been equipped for it. She looked directly at me now, smile gentle, almost kind. You've done your part, little sister. But it's time to let someone who can actually lead take the wheel. You'll always have a place here. Maybe in a quieter role, supporting from behind the scenes. That's where you shine best. The room was dead silent. Then she added the final cut, voice dropping just enough to make it feel intimate, confessional. Some people build the engine, others drive the car. Riley built something useful once. I'm going to make sure it doesn't crash. A smattering of awkward laughter. A few people shifted in their seats. Dad didn't move. He didn't stand. He didn't speak. He just looked down at his plate, hands folded, silent. That was the worst part. Not Sabrina's words. Not the humiliation in front of 100 people who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. It was Dad choosing silence, choosing her. Again. I felt something inside me shift. Not break, not yet, but shift. Like the last piece of a lock clicking into place. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I didn't throw a glass or storm out dramatically. I simply set my champagne flute on the nearest table, turned, and walked toward the elevators. The jazz started up again behind me, tentative, like it was embarrassed to keep playing. I heard Sabrina's voice resume, brighter now, thanking everyone for their support, promising exciting announcements soon. I didn't look back. The elevator doors closed. The descent was quiet except for the soft ding of each floor. When I stepped into the lobby, the night air hit me, thick, warm, smelling of exhaust and jasmine from a nearby vendor cart. I stood there for a long minute staring at the river lights reflected on the water. For years I had told myself that enduring was strength, that swallowing the hurt, keeping my head down, building in silence, that was how you won in the end. But tonight I understood something new. Enduring isn't the same as surviving, and silence isn't always dignity. Sometimes silence is just permission. I took out my phone, opened the Notes app where I'd been privately documenting everything. Every meeting I'd been excluded from, every decision made without me, every time my contributions had been reframed as team effort, while Sabrina's were branded as genius. I added one more line. Date, January 17th, 2026. Event, public demotion and humiliation at Dad's 60th birthday. Witnesses, 120. Dad's response, none. Then I closed the app. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. I was done being the invisible sister. I was done letting them write me out of my own story. And whatever happened from here, it would not be quiet. I didn't sleep. After the rooftop party, I walked home through the neon-lit streets of District 1, past closed karaoke bars and late-night Fio stalls still steaming under plastic awnings. The city didn't care that my world had cracked open in public. It just kept moving. Motorbikes weaving, streetlights buzzing, someone laughing too loud somewhere down an alley. I let the noise drown out the echo of Sabrina's voice calling me little sister like it was an insult. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky was already turning the bruised purple of pre-dawn. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, and opened the folder I'd been quietly maintaining for over a year. Insurance. Inside were PDFs, screenshots, email threads, signed documents, Git commit logs time-stamped with my name alone. Evidence, not revenge. Protection. I'd told myself I was paranoid when I started collecting it all. Now I knew I'd been exactly right. At 6:47 a.m., I sent one email. Subject: Important update. Carter Dynamics Leadership and Ownership Structure. 2. Board U Carter Dynamics. N. Investors Carter Dynamics. EN. All employees are Carter Dynamics. The N. Sabrina Carter Dynamics.vn. Thomas Carter Dynamics.vn. CC. Legal Prime Codesolutions.com. My personal lawyer copied for record. The body was short. Professional cold. Good morning. Effective immediately. I am exercising my rights as majority shareholder. 51% of Carter Dynamics JSC. The core intellectual property, including but not limited to the Stockflow platform source code, architecture, database schemas, and all derivative products, is owned and licensed exclusively by Primecode Solutions, Ltd., a company wholly owned by me. Carter Dynamics holds no ownership interest in Primecode Solutions and operates under a revocable licensing agreement that I am terminating as of 9 a.m. today. All key engineering personnel have employment contracts with Primecode Solutions, not Carter Dynamics. A number of major enterprise clients have already been notified and have elected to migrate to Primecode Solutions directly. Further communication will follow through proper legal channels. Riley Carter, founder and majority shareholder. Carter Dynamics JSC sole director. Primecode Solutions Part Ltd. I hit send at 6:52 a.m. Then I showered, put on the same navy dress from the night before, because why not wear the armor twice? Tied my hair back and walked to the office. No grab. I wanted to feel every step on the pavement. I arrived at 8:42 a.m. The lobby security guard, Uncle Min, who'd known me since I was bringing Dad lunch at 16, gave me a small, worried nod but didn't ask questions. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than it ever had. When the doors opened, the open-plan office was already buzzing with confusion. People stood in clusters staring at phones. Slack was exploding. I could see notification counters climbing on screens as I passed. Someone whispered my name. Someone else quickly looked away. I didn't stop at my old desk. I walked straight to the glass-walled executive suite that used to be ours, but had become Sabrina's throne room. She was inside with Dad and 3 board members. The blinds were half open. I could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Dad sat at the conference table, head in his hands. The board members looked like they'd aged 10 years overnight. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room froze. Sabrina spun around first. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were red-rimmed. She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. "Riley," she said, voice tight, "this is unexpected. We were just about to call you in for a discussion." "No need," I said. My voice came out steady. I hadn't rehearsed this part. I didn't need to. I'm not here to discuss. I'm here to inform. I placed a slim folder on the table. the physical copies I'd printed at a 24-hour shop on the way. The top page was the share certificate from 2023. The one Dad had signed without reading the fine print because it's just family paperwork, Con. The one that quietly transferred 2% more shares to me when he was renewing the company registration and feeling sentimental about keeping everything in the family. 51%. Clear. Irrevocable. I tapped the page once. You signed this, Dad. 3 years ago. You said you trusted me to handle the legal side so you wouldn't have to. You didn't read the dilution clause or the part about voting rights. I didn't hide it. You just didn't look. Dad lifted his head slowly. His eyes were glassy. He didn't speak. Sabrina snatched the folder, flipped through it, colour draining from her face with every page. That's not... This can't be legal. We'll contest. You can try, I said. My lawyer is already on standby. But while you're contesting, the licensing agreement expires in... I checked my watch. 17 minutes. At 9 a.m., stock flow goes dark for every Carter Dynamics customer unless they've already migrated. I let that sink in. Then there's the talent, I continued. All 7 senior engineers, the ones who rebuilt the back end last year, who built the AI forecasting module, who keep churn under 3%, are on prime code payroll. They've been dual contracted for 18 months. They're loyal to the code, not the logo. They're already packing their laptops. Sabrina's hands trembled on the folder. And the customers, I said quietly. The big ones. The textile group in Binh, the pharmacy chain in Hanoi, the logistics company that makes up 18% of our ARR. They didn't sign with Carter Dynamics. They signed with me. They trusted me because I answered their 2 a.m. support tickets. Because I flew to their warehouses to train their staff. Because when things broke, I was the one who fixed them. Not you. I pulled out my phone, opened the email thread I'd sent at 7:15 a.m. I gave them 45 days' notice of license termination and offered seamless migration to Prime Code at the same price for the next 12 months. 92% accepted within the first hour. The rest are still reading the email. By noon, most will be gone. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Sabrina looked at Dad like he might save her. He didn't. He just stared at the share certificate like it was a death certificate. I took one step closer. I never wanted it to come to this, I said, and for the first time my voice cracked, just a little. I wanted us to build something together. I wanted Dad to be proud of both of us. I wanted you to see that I wasn't just the girl in the back room fixing broken laptops. I looked at Sabrina. But you made sure everyone saw only you. You took the spotlight, the awards, the interviews, the credit. You called me useless in front of 100 people last night. You told me my place was behind the scenes. I exhaled. So here I am, in front, taking back what's mine. I turned to Dad last. I love you, I told him. I always will, but I'm not going to keep carrying a company on my back while someone else wears the crown. I picked up my copy of the folder. At 9 a.m., the license revokes. The platform stops authenticating. Customers lose access unless they've already switched. The engineers walk out today. The revenue disappears tomorrow. I looked around the room, at the stunned board members, at Sabrina's frozen face, at Dad's bowed head. You have 53 minutes to decide what kind of ending you want. Fight me in court and watch everything collapse. Or negotiate. I'm open to fair terms, for old time's sake. I walked to the door, paused, looked back once. And Sabrina? She flinched. You were right about one thing last night. I gave her the smallest, saddest smile. Some people build the engine, others drive the car. I shrugged. But I built the car, the engine, the road, and the map, and I've been driving the whole time. I stepped out, closed the door softly behind me. The office outside had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. I didn't say anything else. I just walked to my old desk, the one I hadn't used in months, sat down, opened my laptop, and started typing the migration instructions for the customers who'd already emailed me in panic. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone lit up with a flood of new messages. Prime Code Solutions was live. Carter Dynamics wasn't. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped pretending I needed their permission to exist. The clock on the conference room wall read 9:17 a.m. when I walked back into the glass-walled office. 17 minutes had passed since the licensing agreement officially expired. 17 minutes since every login attempt on the Carter Dynamics dashboard started returning invalid license, contact administrator. 17 minutes since the first panicked calls from customers began lighting up the support line like fireworks. I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch. When I pushed the door open again, the scene hadn't changed much. Sabrina was still standing, clutching the folder like it might burn her if she let go. Dad hadn't moved from his chair. His shoulders looked permanently curved inward now, as if gravity had suddenly doubled for him alone. The 3 board members had retreated to the far end of the table, phones in hand, whispering urgently to someone, probably their own lawyers, or perhaps the investors who'd poured money into the Sabrina-shaped myth. I closed the door behind me with a soft click. No one spoke at first. I pulled out the chair opposite Dad and sat down slowly. My hands were steady on the table. I'd rehearsed nothing. There was nothing left to rehearse. "I'm not here to gloat," I said quietly. "I'm here to give you 2 choices, that's all. 2 doors. You pick one, and we move forward. Or we don't." Sabrina's laugh came out brittle, almost a cough. "You think you can just walk in here and dictate terms? After that stunt with the emails? You're destroying everything you built?" I cut in, voice calm but sharp enough to slice through her sentence. "Let's not rewrite history again. Not today." I opened my own folder, the one I'd carried under my arm like a quiet bomb, and laid 3 stapled packets on the table, one for each of them. "Choice 1, I said. "I walk away. Completely. I take Prime Code Solutions and everything it owns, the source code, the architecture, the brand equity I built with customers one support ticket at a time. I take the 7 senior engineers who already tendered their resignations from Carter Dynamics at 9:05 a.m. I take the enterprise clients who've already started migrating, and the hundreds more who will follow once word spreads that the platform they depend on is no longer supported here." I met Sabrina's eyes. "You'll keep the name Carter Dynamics. You'll keep the office lease, the remaining staff, the investor money already wired. You'll keep the logo, the website, the awards on the shelf. But in 48 hours, when the last major customer pulls out and the revenue dashboard flatlines, you'll be left with a very expensive shell. A company worth 50 million in ARR yesterday, and 0 the day after tomorrow. You can try to rebuild. You can hire new developers, rewrite from scratch, beg customers to come back. But we both know how that ends. You've seen the churn numbers when a single feature lags. Imagine the churn when the entire product disappears." I paused. "That's door number 1. You keep the crown. I keep the kingdom." Dad made a small sound, half sigh, half choke. He still wouldn't look at me. "Choice 2, I continued, sliding the resignation templates closer. "You both step down. Today. Sabrina resigns as CEO and director. Dad resigns as chairman and director. You transfer your remaining shares, the 49%, to me at nominal value. In exchange, I keep Carter Dynamics alive. I relicense the platform back to the company under new terms. I bring the engineers back. I stabilize the customers. The company survives. The brand survives. The jobs survive. And the story, the real story, finally gets told the way it happened." Sabrina's face twisted. "You're blackmailing us." "No," I said. "I'm offering mercy." Blackmail would be me leaking the share certificate to tech in Asia tomorrow morning with a headline that says, "Golden Child CEO never owned the company she sold to the world. Mercy is me giving you a graceful exit and letting the company live. I looked at Dad. Dad, I don't want to bury the name you painted on that first shutter 20 years ago. I don't want to see the people who believed in us lose their livelihoods. But I will not keep carrying a company while pretending someone else built it. Silence again. Thick, heavy. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Sabrina opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then she looked at Dad. Really looked, searching for the rescue that had always come before. He didn't speak right away. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were wet. But his voice was steady in a way I hadn't heard in years. I signed that paper, he said quietly. 3 years ago. I remember now. I was tired. The shop was struggling. You asked me to trust you with the paperwork, so we could protect the family business. I didn't read every line. I should have. He looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in a long time. I thought giving Sabrina the spotlight would make things right, that she needed it more, that you were stronger so you could handle the shadows. His voice cracked on the last word. I was wrong. Sabrina made a small wounded sound. Dad? He held up a hand, not angry, just exhausted. No more, Sabrina. No more. He reached for the resignation packet in front of him. His hand shook only slightly as he uncapped the pen the board secretary had left on the table. He signed. 2 signatures, chairman, director. Done. Sabrina stared at the paper like it was poison. You can't seriously. I can, Dad said. And I am. He pushed the signed document toward me, then looked at his older daughter. You wanted to lead, Con. You wanted the stage. But leadership isn't interviews and awards. It's carrying what no one else sees. Riley carried it. You wore it. Sabrina's shoulders began to shake, not dramatically, quietly, the way people break when the performance finally ends. She looked at the resignation form, then at me. For a second, just 1 second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not hate, not quite regret. Something closer to recognition. That the person she'd dismissed as background noise had been the only reason the lights stayed on. She picked up the pen. Her hand hovered. Then she signed, CEO, Director, 2 signatures. The room exhaled. The board members didn't speak. They just watched, stunned, as I gathered the documents. I stood. I'll have legal finalise the share transfer and licensing agreement by end of day, I said. The platform will come back online for all customers by tomorrow morning. Full access, no interruption for those who stayed. The engineers will return on Monday. I looked at Dad. I'd like you to stay on as advisor, not chairman. Advisor, if you want. No title, no pressure. Just your experience, if you want. He nodded once, small, grateful. I looked at Sabrina last. You can stay too, I said. In a role that fits. Sales, business development, whatever you're good at. Or you can leave. No non-compete if you leave clean. Your choice. She didn't answer. She just stared at her own signature like she didn't recognize it. I walked to the door, paused. This isn't revenge, I said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. This is balance. The person who built the company finally gets to run it. That's all. I stepped out. The office outside had gone still, people pretending to work, eyes darting toward the glass walls. I didn't stop to explain. I went to my old desk, opened my laptop, and sent 1 email to the entire company. Subject: the road ahead body. The transition is complete. Carter Dynamics will continue. Stronger, clearer, honest. Full platform access resumes tomorrow, 8 a.m. Engineering team returns Monday. More updates soon. Thank you for your trust. We're just getting started. Riley Carter, CEO. Carter Dynamics. I hit send. Then I leaned back in the chair, the same chair I'd sat in at 2 a.m. so many nights, alone, writing code while the city slept. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest was gone. Not because I'd taken something away, but because I'd finally taken back what had always been mine. The papers were filed by the end of that week. By Friday afternoon, January 23rd, 2026, Carter Dynamics belonged to me. Fully, legally, irrevocably. The share register showed my name next to 100%. The board was dissolved and reformed with only 2 seats, mine and 1 held in trust for future independent directors. The licensing agreement between Primecode Solutions and Carter Dynamics was rewritten under terms I dictated. Generous enough to keep the lights on, strict enough to ensure no one could ever again claim ownership of what they hadn't built. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. The office kept running. Customers came back online without major disruption. The engineers returned on Monday, some with quiet apologies in their eyes, others with visible relief. We pushed a small patch that Tuesday to restore full functionality and sent personalised emails to every affected account. Churn spiked briefly, 7.2% that month, but levelled off faster than I'd feared. The dashboard climbed again. Slowly. Steadily. But home, whatever version of home still existed, did not recover so cleanly. Dad moved out of the family house the following weekend. He didn't tell me himself. I found out when the neighbour auntie called to ask why the old blue Vespa wasn't parked in the driveway anymore. He'd rented a small studio apartment near the river in Bintan. Nothing fancy. Just a single room with a balcony big enough for 1 chair and a potted plant. When I drove over unannounced 2 days later, he answered the door in the same faded t-shirt he used to wear when fixing motherboards at the shop. His eyes were tired but not angry. Just empty. "Con," he said, stepping aside to let me in. We sat on plastic stools at a folding table. No words for a long time. The river outside moved slow and brown under the afternoon sun. "I thought I was protecting the family," he finally said. "I thought putting Sabrina in front would keep everything together. That you'd understand. That you were the strong one." I looked at my hands. They still had the faint callus from years of gripping screwdrivers. "I was strong because I had to be," I answered. "Not because I wanted to be alone," he nodded once. A small, defeated motion. "I failed you both," he whispered, in different ways. "But you most of all." I didn't contradict him. There was no comfort in pretending otherwise. He didn't ask to come back to the company. I didn't offer the advisor role again. Some bridges burn cleaner when you let the ashes settle. Sabrina disappeared for a while. No dramatic exit, no public statements. She simply stopped showing up. On Slack, on email, on family group chat that had gone silent anyway. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved to Singapore on a short-term consulting contract. Something in fintech. Something safe. Something far away. She didn't call. I didn't call her. The last message she sent me, 3 days after the resignations, was only 4 words. "I'm sorry. Take care." I stared at it for 10 minutes before archiving the thread. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, because I didn't know what hate even felt like anymore. Just a vast, quiet tiredness. The only person who stayed, really stayed, was Mom. Helen Carter had left when I was 12 and Sabrina was 17. She'd moved to Melbourne with an Australian man she met on a business trip, remarried, built a new life. We kept in touch sporadically. Birthdays, Tet greetings, the occasional long email when something big happened. She never took sides, never asked for money, never pretended the divorce hadn't happened. But when the news broke, Tech in Asia ran a short, careful article titled "Carter Dynamics Leadership Transition, Founder Reclaims Control." She called me at 2 a.m, my time. It was evening in Australia. "Riley," she said, voice soft over the international line. I read the article. Then I read between the lines. I laughed, a small, broken sound. You always could. We talked for 3 hours. About the shop. About Dad's stubborn pride. About Sabrina's hunger for validation. About the nights I spent alone in the back room teaching myself to code while everyone else slept. You didn't just build a company, she told me near the end. You built yourself. And that's harder. And lonelier. I cried then. The first time since the birthday party. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that tasted like years of swallowed words. Come visit, she said. When you're ready. No pressure. Just a place where no one expects you to be anything but Riley. I booked the ticket that night. 2 weeks in Melbourne after the next funding round closed. No agenda, just space. In the meantime, I kept building. Carter Dynamics, my Carter Dynamics, grew in directions I'd only dreamed of before. We launched the AI forecasting module I'd sketched 3 years earlier on napkins during late-night coffee runs. We signed our first government contract, digitizing inventory for a network of rural cooperatives. We opened a small R&D hub in Jianang, closer to the universities that produce the kind of hungry, brilliant kids I used to be. Every new feature, every new hire, every new dollar felt like proof. Not proof that I was right. Proof that the work mattered. That small businesses could thrive because someone had listened to their real problems instead of chasing headlines. But success didn't fill the empty chairs at the dinner table. Some nights after the last employee left and the office lights dimmed to motion sensor mode, I'd sit at my desk, the same desk I'd dragged from the old shop years ago, and look at the single-framed photo I kept there. It was from 2010. Dad, Sabrina, me and Mom standing in front of the freshly painted Carter Tech sign. All of us smiling, all of us still believing the same future. I didn't take it down. I just turned it slightly so I couldn't see their faces when the grief came. Because winning had come at the highest price of all. I had the company. I had the vision. I had the future I'd fought for. But I no longer had a family. Not the way families are supposed to mean safety. Not the way they're supposed to mean you're never truly alone. And no amount of ARR or press coverage or awards on someone else's shelf could ever replace that. So I kept going, because stopping would mean admitting the cost was too high. And I wasn't ready to admit that yet. Maybe someday I would sit down with Dad again, over sa, fei, sua, ja, at a street stall, and we'd talk without titles between us. Maybe someday Sabrina would call, not to apologise, but just to say hello. Maybe someday I'd walk into Mum's house in Melbourne and feel, for the first time in years, like I belonged somewhere that wasn't defined by what I could produce. Until then, I built. Quietly, steadily, alone, because sometimes the only way to heal is to keep moving forward, even when the road behind you is littered with the pieces of what used to be home. January 17, 2027. Exactly 1 year to the day since I walked out of that rooftop birthday party, with champagne still warm in my veins, and walked back into the office the next morning to claim what had always been mine. I didn't plan to mark the anniversary. No champagne, no speeches, no reflective Instagram post with a sunset filter. But the date found me anyway, slipped into my calendar as a quiet reminder when the system auto-populated 1 year since leadership transition from last year's entry. I stared at it for a long minute before deleting the line. Some dates don't need commemoration. They just need to be survived, then outgrown. Carter Dynamics didn't just survive the year. It tripled in enterprise value. We closed the Series A in April at a valuation that made the early investors who'd backed Sabrina's story quietly rewrite their pitch decks. By October, we'd already started talking Series B numbers that felt almost fictional. The platform, now rebranded simply as Flow with a cleaner logo I'd designed myself on a Sunday afternoon, powered inventory, procurement, and predictive analytics for over 32,000 businesses across 6 countries. We launched integrations with local payment gateways, e-commerce marketplaces, even government tax portals. Churn dropped to 2.1%. Net revenue retention climbed to 138%. The dashboard no longer felt like a report card. It felt like breathing. I hired people smarter than me. I listened when they disagreed. I stopped checking every commit myself and started trusting the team I'd fought to keep. We moved to a bigger office in District 1, not flashy but bright, with a rooftop garden where people actually ate lunch instead of scrolling LinkedIn. I kept the old scratched desk from the repair shop in the corner of my office, a reminder, not of pain, of origin. Sabrina found her way, not back to us, not to the family house that still sat mostly empty, but to something smaller, steadier. I heard about it indirectly. Through a former employee who'd stayed in touch, she'd landed a mid-level business development role at a mid-sized fintech startup in Singapore. No corner office, no TEDx invites. Just steady work, building partnerships, closing deals, reporting to someone else. The LinkedIn headline was simple. Business Development Manager, helping SMEs scale securely. No mention of Carter Dynamics. No founder badge. Just honest work. A mutual friend told me she'd cut her hair shorter, started wearing flats instead of heels, and posted fewer photos. Someone else said she'd started volunteering at a women's entrepreneurship program on weekends, not as a speaker, but as a mentor for the early-stage founders who reminded her of who she used to be before the spotlight became oxygen. I didn't reach out. She didn't either. But I stopped archiving her old messages. They just sit there now, quiet artifacts of a chapter that ended. Dad retired. Properly this time. No half measures. He sold the old shop to a young couple who wanted to turn it into a hybrid cafe and gadget repair spot. They kept the Carter Tech sign above the door, not out of sentiment, but because customers still asked for the place with the old red letters. Dad moved to a small house in Vung Tau, near the sea. He bought a second-hand fishing rod, joined a group of retirees who play ko tuong under the casuarina trees every morning, and started texting me photos of sunrises over the water. The messages are short. Konan sang chua? Today the sea is very blue. Miss your mother's foe. Still can't make it right. Once, only once, he called instead of texting. It was late. I was still in the office debugging a minor API issue that wouldn't let go. Riley, he said, voice rough with salt air and years. I was wrong. About almost everything. I chose the wrong daughter to believe in. Not because Sabrina was bad, but because I was afraid. Afraid you'd outgrow us. Afraid I wouldn't understand what you were building. So I pushed you to the back, where I could still pretend I was needed. He paused so long I thought the call had dropped. I'm proud of you, he finally said. Not because of the money, because you never stopped being kind to people who needed help, even when we didn't deserve it. I didn't say much back, just, I know, Dad. And, come visit when the weather's good. He did, 2 months later. We ate bun cha at a street stall near my apartment. No titles. No apologies repeated. Just father and daughter eating in the noise of scooters and laughter, like we used to before everything got loud. The world started calling me things. Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia. Women in Tech Trailblazer. Vietnam's Quiet Unicorn Builder. I accepted the invitations when they made sense. I spoke at startup events, at university panels, at small founder meetups in coffee shops. I talked about listening to customers, about writing code at 3 a.m. because someone's wedding photos were trapped on a failing hard drive. About how the best product decisions come from empathy, not ego. The invitation that meant the most came in November. An email from the international high school Sabrina had graduated from. The one with the ivy-covered gates and the debate trophies she used to polish like medals. They wanted me to deliver the keynote at their annual Women in Leadership conference. I almost declined. Then I accepted. I stood on that stage in late December, looking out at rows of teenage girls in crisp uniforms, some already dreaming of the same spotlight Sabrina once chased. I told them my story, not the polished version, but the real one. The back room, the biscuit tin full of cash, the birthday party, the morning I walked in and changed everything. I didn't mention Sabrina by name. I didn't need to. I ended with this. People will underestimate you because you don't shout, because you stay late fixing what's broken instead of posing for photos, because you build in silence while others perform in the light. Let them. The work doesn't lie. And when the time comes, and it will, the truth has a way of standing up taller than any spotlight ever could. The applause was loud, genuine. A few girls came up afterward to ask questions, eyes bright with possibility. I flew back to Ho Chi Minh City that night feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, not because I'd proven anyone wrong, because I'd stopped living to prove anything at all. I no longer woke up thinking about revenge or credit or what Sabrina might say if she saw the new valuation slide. I woke up thinking about the next feature that would save a small shop owner from bankruptcy during Tet Rush. About the junior developer I'd just promoted who reminded me of 16-year-old me. About whether Dad's sunrise photo meant the sea was calm enough for fishing today. The anger had burned out somewhere between the Series A term sheet and Dad's first Vung Tao text. What remained was purpose. Clean. Quiet. Mine. And for the first time since I was a girl soldering capacitors under fluorescent light, I understood that real victory isn't taking something back. It's building something so solid, so true, that no one can ever rewrite it again. Not even family. Not even time. I still have the photo on my desk, the one from 2010 in front of the shop. I turned it back to face me. Because the past doesn't have to hurt forever. It can just be part of the story, and the story, my story, is still being written. One line of code, one customer saved, one sunrise at a time.